Hey guys, and welcome back to the One Piece Club, where we dive deep into the biggest mysteries of Oda's world. Now, there's a little problem with this world, right? And it's too big. What is this? Do we have to become social scientists, historians, or political scientists to understand this? I can't believe how complex the One Piece world has become. This became very clear in the Egghead Arc, and many of us got a bit frustrated by how Oda kept just adding more and more mysteries to the story in this arc without any answers, especially when you realize that it was a short arc when you actually sit down and count the chapter. It was really short, and it was about a third of Wano, double the mysteries. Like, this was so crazy, man. But don't worry, guys, don't worry, I got you. Last time I did an Egghead Arc recap, but that was just for the Egghead Incident plotline. It was about the action, just about the main events that took place on Egghead. We talked about everything related to the assassination of Vegapunk and the insane battle against the 5 elders or Gorosei. Now, that was part 1. Now, this is part 2. And I'd like to switch over to the other plot lines, the Kuma and Bonney plotline, the Vegapunk plotline, the Revolutionary Army plotline, and finally the Void Century plotline. This organized way really makes everything clear and simple. The arc was moving from one thing to another in the same chapters, which made it very difficult to understand and remember what actually happened. So please make sure to keep watching until the end, and I appreciate everybody who's been watching my videos. If you haven't watched it, or if you're new to the video, kindly like, comment, subscribe, and join the channel. We're still at 100 subs. Let's get to 500. It's a huge ask, but please subscribe so our channel can grow, so we can have more eyes on the channel, and then we can achieve my One Piece. All right. Anyway, now, at the end of the video, if you think this video prevented you from rereading the chapter, or if you think this video actually helped you from reading the arc 10 extra times, then please subscribe to the channel, okay? I appreciate that. Okay, so it is not an exaggeration to call this arc Kuma's arc. Kuma's flashback was, in my opinion, the best piece of this arc. And I know that some people criticized Oden's flashback, so this was Oda's way of replying to this criticism. It was an absolute masterpiece, but we'll have to go back in time and start from the beginning. For the entire time, we looked at Kuma and just saw a silent, loyal warlord who sent the Straw Hats flying to Sabaody, right? We thought that he was just a government dog or maybe a double agent who got caught. But bro, we didn't know anything. When we saw Bonney at the start of this arc trying to stab Vegapunk with that beam or saber, right? None of us could understand her goal. And it's these weird instructions Oda gave us that made this pair so unique. Both of them were seen as antagonists or just like some third party, right? But they were both moving for the sake of other people. Honestly, if I saw my dad turning into a mindless cyborg weapon, I'd be burning the whole lab down too. I get it. But this is what made me reconsider my image of Vegapunk, by the way. The moment that Bonney saw or found that paw room in which all of Kuma's memories and secrets are stored, we knew we were about to witness something that will change the story forever. Now, I'm exaggerating here, guys. I'm exaggerating, but it really deserved all that hype. We have to talk about that flashback or this flashback because it is arguably the best backstory Oda has ever cooked up. Kuma isn't just a good guy. He's the literal hero of the One Piece world. And I still can't find a character that rivals his historic feats. If you know some of them, please put them in the comments because people like these deserve applause. But let's continue. I'm yapping too much. He was enslaved right after birth just because he had Buccaneer blood and was forced to watch his parents die. Then he met Ginny. They grow up together. They start life together, and the world government just takes everything away from him. Again, well, they had to get revenge for helping 500 innocent people escape from God Valley, right? And that is a very serious crime, my friends. That young kid saved 500 innocent people, and this is what led to his story. Then we saw the tragedy of Jenny being kidnapped by a celestial dragon, who was then forced to be his wife. Like, look, I don't want to extend the talk about this, nor use the correct words for it, right? You can imagine what happened when she was kidnapped. And then she gets thrown away when she catches the sapphire scale disease. Yo, Kuma not being able to find Jenny is fully justified. Like, how could he or anyone from the Revolutionary Army get info on what was happening in Marijoa, right? He finds Jenny dying, takes her baby, and decides to raise her as her daughter. He raises her alone in a church while she has the same terminal illness that her mom has, which killed her. The man spent years traveling the world looking for a cure, getting rejected by every doctor, being hunted by the Marines, and he never, ever gave up. Not once. He kept smiling for Bonney, telling her about Nika, and giving her hope every chance he got. This is what a real father looks like. Do you hear that, Dragon? Do you hear that, Garp? Right? Do you hear that? And you too, Gin from Hunter x Hunter. Like, yo, we didn't forget about you, right? But then Saint Saturn, I swear Saint Saturn, right? But then Saint Saturn, I gotta say it again, right? I swear I have never hated a fictional character more than Jay Garcia Saturn. When Kuma finally found a cure for Bonney before she could die, Saturn steps in, whoop, excuse me there, right? He steps in with the most demonic deal in history. He offered Kuma the cure to cure Bonney in exchange for becoming a warlord and a mindless cyborg, which is worse than being a slave. Now, Vegapunk works for the world government, so it's not as if he works for free or runs a charity, right? But he had a hand in this, and that was his sin that he mentioned. Kuma didn't hesitate for a second to lose his own humanity and use that to save his Bonney or his daughter's life. He literally sold his soul so she could live to see the sun. And I can make a big or huge list about the good parents in shonen manga, and Kuma is definitely top 3. His sacrifice wasn't just built, right, on his kindness and his personality. For someone who lived through endless sufferings and a few moments, right, a few moments of happiness, this sacrifice, priceless. Kuma is really the embodiment of selflessness. He's an incredible character, right? And I'm not going to add more pain to you guys, so I'll treat the case of Bonney's devil fruit as a good thing, right? I'm not going to consider it as a tragedy of being Saint Saturn's guinea pig. Let's not talk about it. Let's sweep it to the side, okay? Right? The Toshi no Mi is a perfect devil fruit for the One Piece world. And for a girl who inherited Kuma's will, right? If Bonney believes she has no future, she becomes weak. If she believes in Nika, she becomes strong, right? It basically all depends, right, on her dreams, her hopes, just like how Kuma succeeded in saving Bonney's life by never losing hope. Saturn tried to break her spirit. That is more than cruelty. If he kills her hope, he kills her power. She has to believe in the freedom she has never seen in order to manifest the fruit's true powers, right? Now, I really can't think of a better way to tie everything together. But it's amazing how Oda links Bonney's spirit to her powers and how overcoming fear and despair was literally the key to defeating Saturn. Bonney isn't just changing her age, she is literally reaching into the multiverse and making a what-if timeline into a possibility or into a reality. But here's the irony though. Here's the irony, right? The biggest nerf to her or her powers is reality itself. As Saturn says, the more she learns about how cruel and limited the world actually is, the harder it is for her to imagine a good future, right? Now, this is why her meeting with Luffy and her relationship with him is extremely important for her ability. By seeing Luffy as Nika, the limit on her future is removed. She realizes that everything is possible, which takes her through to God tier levels. We know that paramecia awakenings usually let the user affect their surroundings, not just themselves. So what happens if Bonney starts using distorted future on other people? Like, this is a nightmare for Imu because it might be the counter to the Adomi Reversi. She could look at Imu's victims and force a distorted future on them where they're basically free, right? She could look at a hopeless army and imagine a timeline where they aren't under Imu's control, literally rewriting their reality. Bonney might be the only one capable of making Imu's authority meaningless. Anyway, let's not stretch this optimistic talk further and go back to Kuma, right? Kuma reaching Egghead, you know, it's one of those moments you have to include in a 60-second One Piece video, right? I've seen countless entrances of shonen heroes, and this one is truly, in my opinion, top tier. Now, what made it even more memorable is this punch. Like, yo! It feels so good every time to reread this arc, right? This anime version wasn't that bad either, but I love the manga version even more. Okay, so as we saw in part 1 of this recap, the allies, including Bonney and Kuma, succeeded in escaping the island. And Lilith promised Bonney that she will find a way to fix Kuma, right? We thought that going to Egghead and defending Bonney was a sign of gaining his humanity back, but that is unfortunately not the case. Whether it was thanks to his very strong will, his feelings as a father, or thanks to Vegapunk's programming, right? Kuma is still a mindless cyborg. I'm 100% sure that he's going to be coming back as one of the major characters alongside the Revolutionary Army in the final war, right? So we now have to move on to the Vegapunk plotline, which is the very definition of controversy, right? Now, let's be real and honest about Vegapunk, okay? We spent years hyping him up as this mysterious Einstein-looking guy who would explain everything. He was supposed to be this Einstein-looking guy who would explain devil fruits and save the world. But it turned out that Vegapunk isn't a hero and he isn't a villain either. So what is he? See, it started back with MADS, M-A-D-S, right? Which I like to call a dream team or the dream team of illegal science, right? That organization was definitely an evil organization funded by that loan shark. Not as evil as the world government, but Vegapunk's position doesn't change in this case, right? This is where we see the controversy actually begin. He created Stussy, the first successful clone, proving he could replicate life itself, right? It's amazing, sure, but it shows his obsession for progress at any cost. He was chasing a perfect future while ignoring some basic ethical lines, right? And I know that in the One Piece world, such ethics may not exist about his hypocrisy, right? Now, I believe that Oda tried to show us this hypocrisy, right? That famous scientists have when it comes to ethics, but in an indirect way, right? The O'Hara incident was the pivotal moments that defined his entire career. He went there and saw the aftermath of the Buster Call, and this is where him and Dragon split paths. Dragon saw the world government's cruelty once again, which only made his resolve for revolution stronger. But Vegapunk, what was that sad face for, fam? What was that sad face for? Was he really sad? Didn't he, with that gigantic brain, realize that the world government will use him to commit worse or much, much worse crimes? Like, this is a question Vegapunk didn't answer, and everything is clear. It's clear that he put his scientist career above other people's lives, right? He kept telling himself that it is all for the sake of peace, right? Just to come into terms with his conscience. It was all for the sake of peace. That's all he said to himself. And I know people tried to defend him saying he needed the funding, but let's call it what it is. It was a deal with the devil. He thought he could use the world government's resources to make peace without getting his hands dirty. And you know the world government was not going to fall for that, right? That was impossible. This naivete, did I even say it right? Yo, this naivete hits its peak with a mother flame. Vegapunk's goal was noble, right? Free and unlimited energy for the entire world, right? Like, that is a literal utopia for us people in the 21st century. But because he handed the keys to Emu, right? The evil dawn, right? That dream of energy, that beautiful energy instantly weaponized to erase Lucia off the map. He also took the kindest man in the entire series and turned him into a mindless robot or a mindless weapon of the state. He literally programmed Kuma to protect, the very system that enslaved him. Like, that is slavery to the power too, fam. Yo, but that was not funny. Apologies, I'm sorry. Vegapunk could have asked Kuma to pay for the cost of treatment in many other ways, right? But Vegapunk became greedy, right? He became greedy the moment he knew he was a buccaneer. Now, to me, whether he had good intentions or bad intentions, the fact that he intended to use Kuma for his evil project didn't change. Now, I call it an evil project because we know its results, but I can't say that he wanted to erase his individuality as well, right? I really can't say if he actually wanted to do that because Vegapunk was not going to profit from that at all. Now, this is why Saint Saturn called him a soft guy, right? Saint Saturn was waiting to see if Vegapunk could seize that opportunity, right, to demand those cruel conditions from Kuma, but he couldn't. He failed. This also means that when Vegapunk snapped after Saint Saturn, added those terms and conditions, right, he wasn't 100% real. So to me, Vegapunk was an accomplice, which makes him part of the evil trio, which made Kuma suffer during his entire life. Now, the villainous trio would be Saint Saturn, Kinbakori, and Vegapunk, right? But I guess Vegapunk redeemed himself in a small way, right? Only a small fraction of his sins towards Kuma and Bonney. He redeemed himself. But But that's by making all the pacifista units obey Bonney's orders, regardless of anyone. He knew what he did to Kuma, so he had to make sure his daughter was good, right? Now, despite saying all of this about Vegapunk, I do believe he's a tragic character, and I sympathize with him a little bit. Poquito, just a little bit. Now, what makes it hurt even more is the family dynamic he built with Kizaru and Sentamaru. Fam, these weren't colleagues. They were not just colleagues. They were family. Kizaru was the cool uncle, but also the man who will eventually kill him. And that is Vegapunk's fate. He spent his life building lasers and weapons to keep peace, only to have those exact weapons turned against him. But in the end, his genius was just a tool for the world government, right? Was just a tool for the world government. The moment he became an inconvenience, they got rid of him. In contrast, Dragon realized all along the cruel truth of working for the world government. And he was Vegapunk's friend. Dragon is a genius, right? You can watch my Dragon video if you don't believe me, right? I talked in detail about his history and his plan to overthrow the world government. I'll just be recapping a few information here and there that we basically got about the Revolutionary Army, right, in this arc. In the Kuma flashback, we witnessed the foundation of the Revolutionary Army, right? The foundation of the Revolutionary Army and their transformation from freedom fighters. They led a coup, right, against King Bakori and succeeded in freeing Sorbet Kingdom from his tyranny and the Celestial Dragon tribute. We also saw their big operation in Marijoa, which, right, was a complete success because Emu is struggling right now, right? No, let me rephrase that. That was even better than success, right? They freed Kuma, they burnt down the Celestial Dragon's food and supplies, and Sabo came back alive from his fight against Emu, right? And the 5 elders. You know, his fight with King Cobra where he was in the throne room and he saw everything. That exposure, fam, I cannot wait. But anyway, for those few chapters, right? Those few chapters were an absolute masterpiece at that time. We had so many great things like burning the statue, right, in the middle of Marijoa, and Fujitora actually showing us true justice. Fujitora is probably one of the most underrated in terms of character depth. This guy is amazing. And I always use every chance I get to appreciate him. Fisher Tiger was a slave to begin with, so it's normal that he had this big motivation and goal, right, to help other slaves escape. But fam, Fujitora is a damn Marine admiral. Yet he freed the slaves after fighting, right, another Marine. Let me actually specify that. He actually fought another Marine admiral on top of Marijoa. Like, please, Oda, please, don't let those assholes execute him. I want him to stay alive all the way to the end. Hopefully switch sides and help the Straw Hats, right? Anyway, that's my dream. But let's continue. So the Revolutionary Army is now imposing a deadly siege on Marijoa. Every ship that tries to get new supplies gets destroyed by them, right? Because think about it, right? Those guys live on top of a mountain that only a few people can get access to or even get to the top. They're technically isolated, and I love how they're starving to death, right? But compared to their crimes, this is nothing, to be honest. Nothing compared to what Emu did to Lulusia with the Mother Flame. But fortunately, a great number of citizens managed to escape with the Revolutionary Army, right, who were hiding there. So in the middle of this back and forth war, right, Dragon is still waiting, aka the man who waits, and not making a move. The moment he makes a move is when those stupid holy knights are sent by Garling. Now, pardon my language by calling them stupid, but they're honestly, can we be honest, my people? They're stupid, but they're very strong. Very, very strong. We saw a fraction of their power in the current arc, which is elbaph, but I don't think they're on the 5 elders level, right? And speaking of the 5 elders, we need to talk about Saint Saturn, right? It's thanks to this guy that the Straw Hats survive and we get to read One Piece after the Egghead Arc, right? So thank you, Saint Saturn. We appreciate that because the chapter and the story still continue, right? 200 years of research, Saint Saturn. 200 years of research on the Iron Giant that attacked Marijoa without any useful results. Well, it's less than 200 years because he at one point ordered its destruction, but Vegapunk kept it, right? This robot is currently one of the biggest mysteries in One Piece, right? We know only a few things about it, And the robot is called Emet, and it was Joyboy's friend 800 years ago. It uses the mother flame as a source of energy, and it was probably, right, created by the ancient kingdom. Now, its relationship with Joyboy is interesting, but I think having an entire army of such giants, it's so much more interesting, right? So, holy shit, I just thought of something. What if the reason the ancient kingdom kicked Joyboy out was because he created Emet? That was insane thinking about that right now. Let me know in the comments if this is true. If you side with me, let me know. But let's continue. I still can't imagine how Joyboy and his allies lost to Emu and the 20 Kings. Well, Nerona Emu is technically one of those 20 Kings. And the craziest thing about Emet is having Joyboy's Conquest Haki. Fam, to be honest, that didn't make any sense, and it still doesn't, right? Because how could someone save their haki in a knot, right? Like, this is absurd. But I do remember when Nami went to one of the Cloud Islands, she had a scientist who showed her these knots, which had wind attributes in them. Maybe that could be one of those, but it's quite interesting. But I still think it's absurd, right? And I wish Oda had given some sort of hint or a basic explanation to this, so my mind doesn't keep running wild as I make this video, right? But in any case, that was an amazing moment when Emet unleashed all of that haki, right? We got the flashback. We see Emet pull this rope out and then bam! That was an amazing moment when Emet unleashed all of that haki. And it's confirmed that at that level of haki, people can cancel the demonic powers of the 5 elders. But I don't think that it is that straightforward for Emu, right? We also got a good chunk of information about devil fruits from Vegapunk, right? But a lot of things are still unclear. A lot of things. But we now understand that they are manifestations of people's desires, right? I had this old video, right, in my previous channel where I talked about the desire of all things, right? Where basically millions of people, right, during hundreds of centuries kept desiring and desiring and dreaming until some alien force helped make those desires a reality, right? In the form of fruits. Now, on top of this, another major player of the Void Century, right, was introduced. And that is Queen Nefertari D. Lily, who was also one of those 20 kings. But she was later betrayed by Emu for scattering the poneglyphs around the world, right? Lily left a secret message to the future kings of Alabasta, and it's now with Sabo after Cobra's death, right? And I think Vivi's role in the story will be revived sooner or later because she's still with Big News Morgans following the Straw Hats, right? And especially since she's being chased by Emu, right? Vivi succeeded in escaping Marijoa, and now she's, like I said, with Big News Morgans alongside our living legend, Wapol. Like, what? Like, you got a problem with that, right? He's one of the few dozens of people who saw Emu, right? So, of course, just from that, he's a living legend. Okay, so now comes the most controversial part of this arc, which is Vegapunk's broadcast. For 8 chapters, this broadcast dragged on and on and on, but then we got almost nothing. Like, if that broadcast had been intended, right, for the One Piece characters and ordinary civilians, it would have been better if Oda finished it within 2 or 3 chapters, right? The only useful piece of information we got was about the old continents and how the ancient weapons, right, caused the sea levels to rise. Now, for normal people of the One Piece world, everything was enormous, huge, secrets they never heard before. But for One Piece readers, most of what he said was obvious things everybody knew. This, of course, frustrated a lot of fans, including me, of course, and I gotta be honest. And this feeling of frustration was enforced by the fact that Vegapunk's plot fully fleshed out all the way. I had hopes, like huge hopes, right? But anyway, there are still so many questions still hanging in there about this guy, and just like I said earlier, right, we got only a few internal monologues of Vegapunk. So how were we supposed to understand him, right, if you think about it? Vegapunk is a character that lived in the story for just about 56 chapters, right? The guy was being hyped since chapter 400 or even before that. Like, fam, this is unfair. And I don't think Lilith will fulfill that role either. We need that same old, sinful, genius old man and not his clones, right? But despite all of that, right, or despite everything I've said, the Egghead Arc still remains the gate of the final saga. It's Because just like what the narrator said, right? The Egghead Incident was one of the key moments when history changed. It's not just the Egghead Incident, but all other events that were taking place in other places of the world that can also be considered a big trigger for the final war.